Hi, it's David again, and in this video we talk about mat cutting itself, how we achieve that beveled opening. Now again, this is extracted from my framing class, so I hope you enjoy the content. What we're going to have a look at is just cutting a single mat board. Now first up, we've got a little Logan handheld cutter, which is just a simple tool. It's really easy to use. It's a lot easier than, say, using the Stanley knife. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you, I'll cut a window using the Stanley knife so that you can see the problems that are involved. Now I haven't done this for a while, but I'll give it a go for you. In the old days, framers used to use a heavy steel ruler, and they would sharpen a blade up from a piece of a hacksaw blade. When you cut a hole out of a board, it's normally cut on a bevel, normally cut on a 45-degree angle. Now there's a theory to this, and it helps lead you into the picture, but that's not really the reason. It's actually a lot easier to cut a hole out of something that has got a 45-degree angle than it is to cut a hole out of it with a straight line. And the reason for that is, in the corners there, you can actually, the blade has to travel through the board to get to the other side. So if you put the try to cut a straight one, you're digging the blade into the board just at that point, and you can't get a clean corner. So normally you cut past the corner and come past at the other end. So it's really overcut a little bit on the back, but on the front it shouldn't be overcut. And really, having your frames or having your mat boards cut by using a reliable tool, you won't have any overcuts on your matting. And eliminating the overcuts is what is the difference between, say, something that is quite cheap looking and something that is professional. So I'd encourage you to practice with your machine, to understand how it works, so that you just cut precisely the size you want. And I'll show you a few tips as well along the way with this cutting. So anyway, here we go with a Stanley knife. Now, this is really quite a challenge, because I've even got to think about how I do it. When I'm going to cut with a Stanley knife, cut on a 45-degree angle, I can't put the ruler on the line, because if I'm going to lean the knife over on a 45-degree angle, the blade has to touch the line, not the ruler. So if I'm going to do it that way, I'd actually have to move the ruler inside the line by about the thickness of the ruler. So I'd have to move this inside by about 5 millimeters. That way I can lean the knife over and I can run the knife along the ruler and along the line. Now remember, before I said to you, we're going to not apply much pressure to the knife. We're going to cut gradually through the board. When it comes to cutting the bevel, you have to cut it in one go. So there is a risk involved. I need to think hard and concentrate when I do this, because I'm putting a lot of pressure on this blade. And I don't want to slip and cut my fingers, and I also want to stay on the line. I would encourage you to try this, because then you'll appreciate how much easier it is to use a special tool to do it. But I always used to say to my class, my students over the years, if you can cut a mat board successfully with a Stanley knife, send me your resume, because you'd get a job here. So anyway, I'll show you how it's done. And I encourage you to have a bit of a go, because then you can understand the difficulties involved. So I've put my ruler 5 millimeters inside the line. I have to start cutting just from before that intersection, because by the time the blade gets through, I need to be where that cross is. So again, haven't done this in a while now, so hopefully I can get this going. Blade into the board. Now I've tried to get all the way in, and now the hard part, because I've actually got to apply pressure and keeping that ruler from moving and keeping the knife on the line and on a 45-degree angle. Now I had to use a lot of pressure there, but what I did is I cut on a 45-degree angle with the Stanley knife or with the utility knife in one go, and hopefully, as you can see here, I've actually cut through the board. So it can be done. But there are easier tools. So I'll show you the other side quickly with the little Logan tool. Notice I'm still putting a board underneath when I'm cutting. You want to move the board around, you want to move the mat board around on this so that you're not cutting on the same line all the time, because if you run into one of those lines, you can also make a rough edge. These boards are important because they do give you that clean cut on the front. So now with the Logan Team system, this is much easier. Rather than putting the ruler off the line and trying to lean the knife over, all I do is I put that ruler right on the line I want to cut, and I put it outside the window. So the piece of board again that I'm keeping is underneath the ruler. Now with this tool, once that tool's in position on the ruler there, you can't actually see the start and stop line. So what they've done at Logan is they've put a little guide mark on the back, and in fact on the newer models I've noticed they've put like multiple little lines there, and those extra little lines can help you adjust if you're cutting thicker or thinner boards, or if you're not getting all the way through, you can just cut a little bit more, and you can gauge from this little highlighted line on the back where you've cut. Now this blade looks pretty sharp, but blades, I would say another piece of very important advice, if you haven't used the cutter for a while, or you're not sure what's going on with the cutter, always make sure that that blade is sharp. Put a new blade in. They're easy, they're cheap. It's far cheaper to change your blade than to damage your expensive piece of mat board. Now these have a little depth stop which is underneath the machine. You can always adjust that with a screw, but generally when they come from the factory from Logan, they are already set at the right depth, so pretty much they're right to go straight out of the box. But we'll give one a go. This other one over here is absolutely brand new, haven't cut with it before. I'm going to get it out. We'll put the board in there. We'll have a go on that one in a sec. Anyway, with this one, ruler on the line, you've got to actually hold the ruler. If you've got problems with the ruler slipping around, if you've got arthritis or if you've got sore wrists or things like that, you can always use one of those quick release clamps, you know, like you can get in the hardware shop. They've got a trigger action, or you can use an old C clamp, but that takes ages. All you do is put the trigger clamp on there, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. You've got then like Big Brother holding the end of the ruler for you. That's a little tip. Anyway, you do not need to hold the whole length of the ruler, and this is something that a lot of people, you know, you're always stronger in one side of your body. Like I'm right-handed, but I do a lot of things ambidextrously, but I'm predominantly right-handed. So usually my right hand would win if it was pushing against my left hand. So when you're holding the ruler, the harder you push with your right hand against it, your left hand has to push harder. So you get all this tension in your shoulders and you're trying to, you know, to hold this thing. You need to change your mindset from pushing against the ruler and pushing this way to pushing along the ruler. So I generally will go, and I'm not going to cut here, I'll just show you the technique. I generally will cut a little bit, then I'll creep my hand along a bit, then I'll cut a bit and I'll creep my hand along, and I'll cut a bit and I'll creep my hand along, rather than trying to hold this, and then you see when I get past, I can push the ruler off the line because my right hand is pushing over there and it's acting like a lever against my left. So really important. If you want, you can clamp it down, then as I say, it's secure. Or in this example here, I'm going to creep along the line. So Logan cutter goes on the board, and I line the little highlight line on the back up with where I want to start. When I get to the end there, I stop when the highlight line on the back gets to the end of the board. Gets to the other line. So in line, sometimes I put my finger there just so it can't slip. I hold the two together, and then just, it's like putting a thumbtack in a notice board, or a drawing pin in a notice board. You have to push that blade in, one good shove all the way in. You then lower your hand and come behind it. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They have their arm up on this funny angle like this and they're pushing down. Whereas what you want to do is you want to come behind it and push. Even imagine you're pushing slightly off to the right. It's not going to run off the rail because it's on the little tracks. So hold the ruler, push along with the cutter. Now once I get level with my hand there, I just keep the pressure on the cutter, but I move my hand along. It's like a little caterpillar. We just take an incy-wincy step and we move our hand along. That way, we're always holding the ruler near where the cutter is. So now we're coming up to that line. When the little highlight line lines up with the window line you drew on the back, you take the blade out of the board before you take the cutter off the ruler. If you don't do that, you're going to break the end of your blade off every time, so blade out. So hopefully with that cutter there, we should have also cut a little hole in the board. So now we've cut one with the Stanley knife at that end, one with the little Logan tool there on that end. Now I'm quickly going to grab this machine out of the box. The difference about this actually comes with a cutter, but I'm just going to use the one I've already got set up there because it's got the blade in it and everything. They've given me a scrap piece of board even in there to cut on. I'm just going to take that one out. We'll put our board in there. Now what this does, there is a measuring scale on here. So for example, we read it off the back edge. If I adjust that, I want to read it, I'm setting it to 60 millimeters because we're cutting 60 mil. It has inches on there as well if you work in inches, so no real problem. Piece of scrap board into the machine. Now that's there not to protect the machine, it's more there to protect your board. You'll find if you don't cut with a support board underneath, you end up with a furry edge. So you really want a nice clean crisp edge, so make sure you put a good board in there. So now we can put our board into the cutter and up to the line. Our cutter's going to lock on. Same thing, line it up. Now with this, there's a rubber grip strip under here, so that board is not going to go anywhere. It's great. Makes things a lot easier and quicker. This is a quick machine, and if you have a look at the other little supplement I've got on this video, you can see how we do all that double matting stuff. Blade in, push along till we get to the other end, blade out. Now at this stage, oh, that's actually dropping out. Now that's not necessarily a good sign. It may mean that I've cut too far. And what I'll do, I will deliberately stop short of the line on this last side so I can show you something. Blade in. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop short because sometimes people do actually cut short, or sometimes it's better to stop before the line than to cut way past it. If you cut past, that's that overcut thing I was telling you about. And everybody looks at the mat board and they look at the corners, and if there's an overcut, they think it's a home job. If they look at it and they see a perfectly cut corner, they think it's professional. So here's a little tip. This one will not fall out now because I have deliberately not cut this corner. But I very carefully, and this is quite important, be careful when you finish cutting because you don't want that piece to rip. And all I do is I turn it over and I can have a look and see where I hadn't cut. So just in this corner here, there is just a little bit of the board that's not cut. Now that bit I did deliberately, but sometimes that'll happen to you if the blade's a little bit blunt, or if the board's a little bit thick, or sometimes if it's a tougher material, you may not cut all the way. Now the best thing to use to finish that off is the blade out of the Logan cutter itself. And professionally, when we were using manual cutters, before we went to computers, computerized cutters cut to the micron. They cut perfectly. But all the big straight line professional machines, I would always stop a little bit before the line because I didn't want an overcut. Overcut meant I had to make a new mat board, and because my customers wouldn't pay for it if it wasn't perfect. And I'm a perfectionist, as you can probably tell. So on here, I take my blade and I put it in the window. Now notice how that blade is just sitting there. I'm not holding that blade. That blade is just sitting there. I've got it leant over on a 45-degree angle. All I need to do is keep that board together. Sometimes I put it down on the table and do it. I've got it nice and flat. But if I hold that board together like that, and then I can just gently take that blade and I just come to that corner, and you can see when I got there it just popped. That way I didn't overcut, and now I've got a perfectly beveled mat board. In fact, that bottom cut along here was the one I did with the Stanley knife. It's a little bit bent here on this end, it's a little bit wavery, but it's not too bad considering I don't really do that very often. But you can see how wonderful and straight and clean the other bevels are that we've done. Now that should, if we lay it on, it should fit our print. And I'll hold it up so you can have a little look. So that is our print with the mat board on it. The next thing to do is we're going to cut a backing board. I'm just going to grab a bit and we'll have a look at it. Okay, so what we've got here, this is foam core or foam board. You can use all sorts of different things for your backing, but foam board is really lightweight, it's easy to use, and a lot of picture framers use this. You can get it in acid-free varieties. Be careful with conservation framing. We talk about conservation framing, it's another whole area, but in conservation framing we use different barrier materials between this and the artwork. With a print it's not really going to make too much difference unless you've bought a high-end print, and certainly you can use ultraviolet filtering glass if you're worried about your print fading, and that's something we can talk about in future things. But anyway, foam board is basically a foam centered board. White, comes in black too, but we use a white one. It's clean and easy. You can also get it in a sticky variety. This is a peel and stick. There are plenty of places you can get this online, like foamboards.com.au. They stock this all the time. That's where we get ours from. In fact, I partner with them. They're really cool. You can get it down at your art shop, your picture framer. You pop in, you get some. With a print, we would stick it down on the sticky one. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how we do stuff with plain board, because with most pieces we're going to hinge the artwork, and that means making little tabs that hold the picture in place. The picture's then hung from the top, and it's free to move. Anyway, I just pop this blade away. Now you could square this up just like we squared up the blue board, but this is all I do because you don't see the backing. Well, you see the back of the backing, but you don't see whether it's cut perfectly or not. All I do is I lay my board on top, and then I just trace around it. Be careful you don't actually draw up onto your coloured board. So all I've done there, I've just traced around the outside, so that piece should be square. I then get back in and I use my scrap board, back under, same deal, ruler on the line. This cuts a lot easier than the mat board itself. We'll probably get through there in 2 goes. Yeah. So there's our backing. Mat and backing board and picture. Wow, so now you should be able to achieve a beveled matboard opening. But how do you hinge your picture into that matboard? There are several tricks to doing it the right way, and there are many pitfalls if you do it wrong. So in the next video, we look at the hinging techniques and how you get that picture ready to put into the frame. I'll see you then.